This is Classical Ideas with Greg Soden. Welcome to Classical Ideas. This is Greg Soden. Today is a conversation about a life in Zen training. My guest in this episode is Corey Hess. I got connected to Corey through a mutual friend, Mado Moore, abbot of Sogenji Monastery in Wisconsin. Mado Roshi consistently shares links from Corey's fantastic blog, Zen Embodiment, and I noticed Corey posting regular comments and links on a Facebook group about Zen practice in the United States. I started reading the Zen Embodiment Blog too, and found it to be unique and interesting. Corey's blog creatively and poetically talks about his Zen experience in Japan and the United States and encourages others to dive in to their own unique inner process of embodiment and awakening. Corey's blog brings Zen off the cushion and into society, into parenting, into being married, into the professional world, and into his direct work of helping people in his body therapy work doing structural integration, meditation instruction, Sourcepoint, and craniosacral therapy. You can read his blog about Zen practice at www.zenembodiment.com, and you can find Corey's professional work for body therapy at www.coreyhessbodytherapy.com. Today's conversation with Corey is essentially a three-part conversation. The first part is Corey's backstory for how he found Zen after growing up in Michigan. The second part of our conversation is about his experience living in the Sogenji Zen Monastery in Okayama, Japan, where he was ordained a Zen monk and given the name Ichigen. The third part is about Corey's post-monastery life, his work, his family, and his writing. A large portion of our conversation today refers to documentary film footage shot by the Japanese National Television Network, NHK, which is sort of comparable to the UK's BBC. Over the course of a year at Sogenji, Corey is featured prominently in the 45-minute documentary, which you can find on his blog, on YouTube, and at the links provided in the show notes. After listening to this conversation, I highly recommend you watch the footage as a complimentary experience to listening to this conversation, because Corey's explanations over what happens in the film will greatly enhance your understanding as you watch. A large component of what I did to prepare for this conversation is to watch Corey's life in the footage and write questions about practices, daily routines, the social life among the monastics, and more. While you can enjoy the conversation without watching the footage, you will see the full splendor of Zen training by watching it. You can consider this conversation akin to watching a movie on DVD with the director's commentary turned on. That said, you do not need to watch the footage in order to enjoy this wide-ranging conversation about Corey's life at Sogenji. I love the far-reaching nature of this conversation, and am grateful to Corey for answering questions about monastic life in extremely minute detail. Please follow the links in the show notes to find Corey's work and contact information. I know he'd love to hear from you. From about minute 43 to minute 47, I run into a little bit of a snag with the sound quality. I apologize. Lastly, stay tuned after the conversation for Corey's inclusion of a full chanting of the English version of the Heart Sutra. Please enjoy my conversation with Corey Ichigen Hess. Corey, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Can you spend a moment and just introduce yourself a little bit to the audience? I know we're going to talk about a lot of your story today, but just kind of like who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm a former Zen monk, Rinzai Zen monk, and I spent pretty much all my 20s really deeply involved in Rinzai Zen in Japan and in the States. These days, I'm kind of just a dad. I have 3 daughters, and I also am a body therapist. I do structural integration and a few other modalities. Yep.
Cool. Where did you grow up?
I'm a Midwestern boy. I grew up in Michigan. Yeah, out in the woods. I didn't have any neighbors for about a quarter mile. And so I spent a lot of time out in the woods, kind of investigating. I think I was an early person to really want to investigate what's real and all that in life.
Awesome. Did you have any sort of like spiritual tradition growing up or any connection to any like traditions at all in your family?
We went to the local, Baptist church, but I think I was really craving a lot of that from an early age, and that really wasn't a part of our lives in a big way. So I came in craving something deeper.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what would you say would be sort of like your first introduction to Buddhism in general? Because I know your life really went in that direction. Where did you first come into contact with like the teachings of the Buddha, Zen, and things like that?
Well, I think I had read, Buddhism books in the public library or whatnot, but I think I saw one book one time. In the library, and I think it was actually one of these really great books where they show the Japanese monastery, and I saw the monks, and I think they were all laying in a line sleeping, and I was just totally blown away by, if nothing else, just the aesthetic of it was very powerful. I think it really hit me in a certain way I didn't really understand.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's like the mountains and the robes and the shaved heads? Like, what do you think it was about it that really drew you in?
It was something very Spartan and very pure, and not necessarily morally pure, but just something very, very kind of penetrating and sharp about it. Honestly, I grew up with Star Wars. I was looking to figure out how to be a Jedi or something in my life. So I think I really was looking for some kind of training of, to be able to explore deeply what it is that's moving around, what it is that's existing in space. And so I think that there was a training aspect. I used to watch all these kung fu movies, as a kid. So I was looking for some kind of deep trainings.
Mm-hmm. How old were you when you think that you established like an actual practice in Buddhism?
Well, I don't think I really had a really, real practice until I went to Japan.
Okay.
I think I was, I had sat a few different O sessions,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I had, I'd been at the little monastery on Whidbey Island where I live. There was a little monastery called Tahoma One Drop, and I had been there, and I'd been sitting for a while, but to really get a really deep, start to really investigate this practice for me, it took a long time to even just to be able to sit there and be comfortable and really engage with it. So Japan, you're just thrown into the fire there,
right?
So,
So you went to a monastery, Sogenji, in your 20s, right?
Yep.
How old were you when you went? Do you specifically remember?
I think I was 23.
Okay, so what was your life like from maybe like your early 20s, like 20 to 23? Like what was that point like leading you to the monastery? Because I think that's a really interesting process that a lot of people might be interested to hear about.
Yeah, I think I was looking for a way to, offer myself to the world, and I was really an intense person. Pretty, artistic and pretty gifted with some athletics and physical, but there was some aspect of me that was kind of wound tight, and I felt like there was, there are different parts of myself were not working together. I felt like I was going in a few different directions as a 20-year-old, and so we were wild and crazy. I went to school in Missoula, Montana. We were kind of like trying to be Jack Kerouac and trying to figure out how to, be wild and crazy artists and live life to the fullest. But there was this part of me that really craved some kind of intense training of some kind. But then I got injured when I was in I think I was a little bit after. No, I'm not sure what time that was, but I got injured and I had this whole physical problem with my hip. And through that, I realized through some different energetic practices that, I have to really work on this in a deep way for a long time to sort myself out. And so I went looking for a way to do that, and that's when I really started to look for the Roshi.
Mm-hmm.
It's an energetic master. Okay, so his way of working is basically energetic. So I was going in a few different directions, and I wanted to find a way to somehow work with that.
Okay, so did you meet the Roshi? Was he attached to Sogenji and the monastery on the island that you're in?
So the Roshi is the abbot of the monastery in Japan, Sogenji, and there's a little satellite monastery from that one here, and there's a few around the world actually that he's the man, right? And then there are these little kind of drops of water around. And first I came out from Missoula. I came out to all the way out here to Whidbey, and I came and I visited, and there was a head monk here, and I expected to find someone very nice and gentle, and instead he was sort of this handsome, sharp, kind of arrogant guy who kind of just pushed my buttons like crazy. I said, I'm getting the hell out of here. I don't want to be involved in this. I just want to be like a cool guy and, chase girls and happy. And so, but it really hit me. It kind of like stung me. And so I left and I went traveling around, and I was in places like Cuba, and I was in Cuba. And I thought, why am I not happy? And I realized, it's my internal world has to be sorted out. So it doesn't matter where I am if my internal world is uneasy. So I went back somehow after my departure. I went back, and there was an O session happening at the monastery on Whidbey here, and the Roshi was here, and somehow he invited me to go to tea. Somehow maybe he heard about this weird guy that visited, and the Roshi's looking for his new, wild characters to mold. You know? So he invited me to tea, and I went in, and I couldn't believe it. It was just like meeting, Yoda. Okay. He was moving from this place, which I completely could not grasp. Physically, he was so physically present, and it was like he was so grounded in this way that I couldn't even imagine. It just completely blew me away. And so, he was just looking right through me. I would talk to him, and he completely had me. I was like a pawn in that room with this master, right?
Yeah.
So I said, well, why would a person like me go to train in Japan? And in his, indescribably deep voice, he says, "Ooh, what do you think? What do you think?" And I said, well, it depends on the person, and he says, no, it's to realize why you were born. And I didn't really I had nothing. I couldn't do anything with that. I had zero understanding. And that shook me up. And then I stayed. He let me stay for the rest of the 4 days. It was a 7-day session. He let me stay for the rest of the 4 days. And I sat in one of these knee chairs,
Yeah.
I was just suffering, just this like ball of like key confusion and pain, and then on the last evening, I had this, opening, and it was like time stopped, and it was a really big carrot for me. It was a carrot to show me, oh, this is possible with this. And, I could like read everybody's thoughts. And so, people have stuff like that when they start, and for me, it was a real wake up, like, oh, this is a practice that I could really dive into.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But then I left and I was on my brother's couch in Seattle the next night, but then, oddly enough, a little bit later, I got to go as a chaperone for this group to Japan, and I visited the monastery. And they had me marked as a possible weirdo to go over there, And so I went, and it was really profound for me being with the Roshi and being in the monastery. And there's always an aspect of like you're kind of like, are these yuppies playing dress up?
Mm-hmm.
What is this? But then there's this other aspect where it's like, oh, this is so it deeply affected me. I was going to the Roshi for he allowed me to go for Sanzen, which is the private interview.
Yeah.
And he just sizes you up, and I just went in there and I just cried, and it was very intense, and so it really hit me, but came back and I still just wanted to be a normal guy. I don't want to go do that training. That's crazy, and then then there was an O session again on the island, and day 6 was September 11th, 9/11. And there was, so that head monk I had talked about came into the, day 6, and day 6 you're pretty raw as a new practitioner.
Yeah.
Anyway, he came in and told us that the 2 planes had crashed, so it shook me up, and I realized, oh, I'm going now.
Right.
So that's how I ended up going to Japan.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So everything that you just described, so like going to Japan, people can actually see your experience in Japan because there is a film that exists that you posted on your website, Zen Embodiment, that details your experience in like sort of like a day in the life in a monastery. And so like people can go to your website and they can watch like 50 minutes of footage basically from like the time of a wake up until sleeping time in a monastery in Sogenji, Rinzai Zen Monastery, and you are in the film. Yeah. So tell me about this film. Like, why does this footage of this film exist that demonstrates a day in the life in this monastery?
Well, I think for the Japanese, they have a particular fascination with the foreigners who are there training. I think in some ways for them, Zen is a little bit like, some form of Christianity here that people feel like is kind of tired and old, and maybe they've been there, done that. So they're just shocked by the fact that we are all these foreigners, these really tall, strange, foreigners, men and women are there training for almost decades, years and decades. And so I think for the Japanese, they have this, like, either it's this thing I don't care about, or it's so far and exotic, the training, that normal people don't do Zen training in Japan. They don't think it's possible. So the fact that we're doing it is pretty exciting and exotic for them. Okay,
so how long was this film crew in the monastery filming all this footage?
Yeah, they I think it was like a year that they came and went, and we got to know them pretty well. They were really sweet people, very sincere. Yeah, so through the film, there's some time lapse, right? It's
right.
Like it's winter and then it's spring or whatever, and so that's a little confusing. And also, the film was never finished, so the editing is a little bit tricky. So, but yeah, and also they kind of wanted pyrotechnics. They wanted things to be kind of they didn't want to show anything that wasn't kind of fascinating.
Right, they wanted action, yeah.
Action, yep.
Okay, so in this film, you are in there a lot. So how old were you, do you think, when this film was made?
I I think I was about 27, 28.
Okay,
That, I think I maybe turned 28 during the film. Yeah.
so is this about halfway into your stay in the monastery?
Yeah.
How
Yep.
long were you there again?
Well, that was all my 20s. So
Okay.
after I went there, 23, that was it. So I was just like there, and then I was here a little bit at the monastery. So yeah, it was like 30. We were kind of out of there.
Okay, cool. So in the film, in the very beginning, it sort of shows like the morning wake up routine in a Zen monastery. So people appear to be wearing very, very heavy coats inside. You can see their breath, like it's obviously very cold. And then early in the film, you are there and you hit a giant bell with a wooden hammer. So what does this mean?
Well, so the first thing we do is we go to Choka, and Choka is the chanting. So we do that for like an hour.
Okay.
So you get up, someone says Kaijo, so you wake up, someone yells Kaijo, you get up, and then you go immediately to go chant. Okay, and me ringing that bell is to call everyone to go to the Hondo, the great building, the great hall rather, to chant. So that's everything in the monastery is done with a bell. So that way communication is kept to a minimum in that way. So honestly, what that does is, I hear a bell and I start to smell rice,
Right.
or whatever. You get very Pavlovian in that way. It's funny, yeah.
So after you hit this and you go into the Hondo, the meditation hall in the morning for Zazen seated meditation, how long is the morning meditation?
So like 4 to 5 is Choka, and then you go back to the Zendo and chant just a little bit more, and then everyone runs to Sanzen. So in the video, you see people running, and that's right after Choka.
Okay.
So, and then that morning lasts until 7, or it did when I was there. I think it may have shifted slightly, but so that's 2 hours of Zazen and Sanzen with the Roshi.
Okay. So during the chanting, something that people who watch the footage will notice is the chanting, and this is seriously intense. Like I was taught a little bit, like the Heart Sutra and the 4 great vows in chanting a little bit, and it's really, really hard. And the film clearly shows people who are like catching their breath during these chantings. So, like, can you talk a little bit about the physicality of the chanting practice?
Yeah, I did write one blog post about that. But, everything in the monastery is about, working with our ki, with our energy, okay? And the chanting is partly the reason we get up and go chant is because we get all of our energy flowing through the chanting. And everything with the Roshi starts with Sosokan. And Sosokan is a breathing technique where you extend your breath fully, and then you extend it a little further. And of course, at first, everyone forces that, but really it's more about focus, and it's about getting into our bodies and letting them open up. So often with the chanting, especially at first, I had a lot of problems with the chanting. You're there, you're trying to chant out, but half of you is going in. So a lot of the practice is about figuring out how to get your whole self moving in that one direction. So, that you see that with people in the video, like they're working on that. They're figuring out how to get their whole energy going in one direction. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's really a sight to behold, and in order to actually understand how difficult it is, I think that somebody actually has to try and do it.
Yeah.
So during Zazen, whenever you're seated, you have your hands placed in a really certain way. So a lot of times it'll be like a mudra where like one hand will be resting on top of the other, but then the thumbs will be pressed together in like sort of like an egg shape.
Yeah.
And in the film, I see that the hand mudra in the film is not with the tips of the thumbs touching like you see in some Zen photos. It's kind of like where you have the thumb inside of a fist and then you wrap your hand around the fist. So, like, do you have like a seated meditation mudra that you prefer? Because I've seen it done a bunch of different ways.
Well, I think officially for the pictures, they're going to do this normal kind of with mudra with the thumbs touching. But, Rinzai's a little irreverent, to be honest. It's a little bit more, there's a little less OCD on everything being done exactly perfect. It's not bad that's the way it is. And Soto, I think, is a little more OCD on everything being done exactly, the way Dogen said it or whatever. But the Rinzai, it's a real physical practice. It's a real energetic practice. And a lot of us, the Roshi would normally sit grabbing his thumb. It's a little more like, there's a little aspect, I think, where you can feel your tanden, but just below your navel, you can feel that a little bit differently by grabbing your thumb. And I personally like that better. I think if we're trying to do like this perfect mudra, I think people actually sometimes can't go as deep in their zazen. They can't let go as much if they're trying to do this perfect mudra.
Okay, cool. I like that. I was always curious about that because I've seen it one way. Like our mutual friend Mato Moore has it with the grabbing of the thumb in his book.
Yeah.
And then I've seen people do it with the thumbs touching, like in sort of like the egg shape. And I was always just curious if there was like a specific reason for that. So sorry for getting a little too nerdy and technical there.
No.
So I want to talk a little bit about Sanzen, which you mentioned earlier. And there is a really intense scene in the film where there's a student and teacher meeting, and the student screams like full volume in the face of the teacher, and then the teacher screams back and rings a bell, and then the student bows. So what is the purpose of this? What is this practice known as? Like, why is there this yelling between the teacher and the student, and what is it all for?
Well, those two sanzens that you see are the first one is actually he's actually doing these additional questions after the mu koan, and then the second one is this traditional mu koan. And sanzen is like this meeting of energetic kind of soup, okay? And you are presenting your energetic state of mind, and the Roshi is there with his state of mind. And it's a blending of those. It's a meeting of minds. The mu koan is what you do actually is the shout is an expression of an energetic overflowing. So if done well, it's not force. So if you're really doing the mu, it's exploding out from this overflowing of energy. So people think it's some kind of, that you're yelling, but really, if you're doing it well, it just is emerging from this energetic overflow.
Okay, interesting. So it's not like, what else is like kind of like the purpose for anybody who doesn't know, like these meetings? So
you're going in and you're trying to present your state of mind to the Roshi.
Okay.
And the Roshi's job is to like show you where you're off, show you where your state of mind is fuzzy or it's not sharp, or he finds your gap, and you are looking each time you go in, and it's like you're in this duel, okay, and you want to show him you got it, okay, and his job is to outdo you every time and beat you every time, and to show you, oh, you're wrong there, you're off there, you're missing it. So
okay. So thinking back on your sons and experiences, like what would you say is like the biggest things that you gain from doing a practice like Sanzen over a period of years, like with one teacher?
I would say that the Roshi is this master of he's like this blacksmith who's forging his students to open up to their true nature. And for me, I found this deep level of relating and communicating energetically that completely changed my life. And he was so the communication in Sanzen is there's a verbal aspect. Sometimes you're talking, but really there's this whole under the table energetic aspect. And that's the real teaching. And so you're getting transmitted this Buddha state of mind, and you have to learn how to receive that. You have to learn how to embody and let it transform you and metamorphosize you. That's what Sanzen's about.
Cool. Okay, so when you were there, you don't just ring the bell and chant and sit and do Sanzen. You also work, and you were kind of like a kitchen guy, right?
I did all the jobs.
Okay, cool. There's a guy that you probably know about, an author, Rinzai monk, shows on Jack Hobner. Have you read any of those books?
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Oh my gosh, those books are amazing. So he's got a scene in Zen Confidential where he's always like getting into fights with his kitchen staff and people in the monastery in California. So he's like getting into these huge like brawls in these kitchen scenes, and they are the most hilarious things ever. But your environment seems like super quiet and peaceful in the film, but there's probably more to it than what we see in the film, I would imagine. So you're surrounded by people. What's like the social scene like in a place like Sogenji? Like, are you friends with the people in the film? Is there socializing? Are you not supposed to talk to each other? Like, how does that go?
Well, when I was there was some social stuff really going on, and there's a whole brotherhood, sisterhood thing. As a new person, a kohai, you come, and it's really helpful to have senpais there who've been there a little longer, and they have really transformed through their practice. They can really help a new person, and so there is a whole social aspect there. I had great friends, still great friends from that life. You're all kind of like these mavericky, kind of wild people who go there. You're there because you're some kind of rebel, and but I would say that in the monastery, it's like this oven where everyone is cooking, and the heat is really high, and people are really intense. They're going through all their shit, it all comes up, and so there is conflict after conflict. It is a place of conflict, and people think, oh, you're going to go to this monastery, it's going to be so relaxing, and everyone's going to be smiling the whole time. And really, everything in the monastery moves fast. Everything is intense, and the Roshi is the most intense. So it's the analogy of you have these potatoes boiling in a pot, and all the skin gets boiled, kind of rubbed off. That's a monastery. So you think it's a sweet place, but it's really there can be violence. It's a very intense environment.
Did you ever punch anybody?
No, but there I was I was a problem for a couple of years for sure. And we're doing this energetic work, opening up your body. Emotions come big time. Yeah. So, and part of the deal is that you just have to sit with it. You just have to be with it. And then part of that, it just transforms you. You become tough, and you've had to face it for hour upon hour, and something changes.
Yeah. So you said you're still friends with a lot of the folks that are in the film too?
Yes, very much so.
Awesome.
Very much so. It's like we went through something very intense together. So we if someone walked in the door right now, I would just know they were a Sogenji person, because they'd have a certain type of intensity, a certain energetic flavor, or call it a kyogai. They'd have a certain feel to them that you're a Sogenji person.
Yeah. So one of the surprises for me in the documentary is like the demographic makeup. So you're in Japan, but the demographics seem like strikingly Western. So what was the breakdown, like racial, gender? What was like the breakdown of like in the monastery?
Well, this is an experimental place. So, and this is a place really set up for foreigners.
Okay.
So, this is not the traditional Sodo, which is more. It's just Japanese people. You maybe have one person who's a foreigner. But so the Roshi's teacher Yamada Mumon was his vision was I think it was, yes. His vision was to create a place for Westerners, and he sent our Roshi there to Sogenji to train Westerners, and not just Westerners, but there are people from India, Mexico, Australia, all over Europe, America, obviously. So, and men and women, I think, honestly, about half.
Cool.
Yeah, half. Yeah.
How many people live there? Like when it's full?
When it's full, 50.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not like we got 1,000 people there. It's not like, Joe Shoes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, about 50 for the tops usually. But it goes down to like 20 sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're doing all these things. You're working, you're sitting, you're chanting, you're doing Sanzen, and then you get out of the monastery a little bit and into the community. So like I see at various points in the film, I see members of the public in the film. So what was the monastery's role in public life for the locals in Japan? Like what services did you guys offer?
Well, the Roshi would lead he would give talks, and there was always some kind of festival going on or some kind of, ceremony of some kind. And we would do, Sunday Zazen Kai, which is the community Zazen. So, people would come and, from the community and sit Zazen with us. And, I think we were this huge temple, and people would come for the New Year. It's a big part of people's lives, I think. I'm not sure how much of Sogenji is given to funerals and whatnot. I think in some ways the more smaller temples were that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's always some kind of festival.
So there's also like these, like whenever the community is in there doing like Sunday Zazen Kai, you see these like 70-something little old ladies like sitting or kneeling on the floor throughout like the whole film. So would they only come on like one day of the week?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is a training environment, so it's kind of like they're not going into this oven every day,
right?
So they're going for this certain time. He would do this these little talks, Asahi culture. He would do these little talks. So there would be a group of very devoted 70-year-old women who would come and he would give a talk to, and it's their time and they kind of take over, and they they get special time with the Roshi, and that's very important because the Roshi is very powerful, so they get to kind of soak that up a little. But yeah, they're amazing. I mean, they're kneeling and all that. We should be able to do that too, but we just don't grow up doing it,
Yeah. And so like whenever you're involved in the community, you guys also would have like businesses, right? Like I think I saw at one point in the film, like I saw like you guys like packing seed packages or something. Like how do you keep the lights on in a place like that in a modern, expensive society?
Well, I think that actually what you saw may have been people just saving seeds from their own, from our garden.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, honestly, there's zero business at Sogenji.
Really?
It's all internally funded. This is a huge machine.
Okay.
The whole Japanese. This is like, shots, cathedral. This is a huge temple within a bigger machine. So huge funding from Japan.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because like whenever I think about I read like a book about the history of the San Francisco Zen Center, and they like had like a farm and a restaurant and like a bakery and everything, and they were having businesses left and right, and they were like renting out their monastery for like summer like vacation and stuff. So that's interesting that there's kind of like a little different approach to funding the whole thing in Japan.
Well, there is a philosophy behind that, and that I think the ideal is that people, if you have the ripeness of your practice, that people will fund it. Mm-hmm. This is the idea, and so theoretically, there shouldn't have to be a business because people will want to support that organization if the essence is deep enough. So this is the idea in Japan: is that to work is maybe a little. It's not really recommended.
Okay. So then when you get out in the community a little bit, I saw some parts where you guys are walking through town. And you're dressed differently inside
Right.
the monastery versus when you're in town. So like there are these like rope shoes and these gigantic hats and like leggings that look like tights. So when someone is like in town, like why are you dressed differently when you walk through town, and what happens? Like why do you go out of the monastery into the town?
Um, well, that's called Taku Hatsu, and um, it's honestly for the community. So we actually go out in our ceremonial garb, okay, ceremonial like pilgrimage garb, and even people who are not ordained wear those clothes for takuhatsu. Okay, so people who are just living there and they haven't taken the ordination vows, all that, they go to takuhatsu, and we go, and it's honestly for the people to be able to support the monastery. That, and they don't give that much. It's not like we get a bunch of money, so or rice, So it's more that the community can offer something to for their own practice. So we go for them, honestly.
Cool. And I know some people are wearing navy blue robes, some are wearing black when they're out on the walks. Like, is there any difference in the color of the robes that is important?
The winter robes are the denim, and
Oh, okay.
are the black.
Okay.
So, yeah. So in the winter you wear these beautiful denim, robes, and the summer is this mesh sort of plastic thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I know that you were ordained, and I want
Yes.
to. The last thing I want to talk about before we talk about your current businesses and your current life is your ordination. So your entire ordination is in the film, right?
Yeah. I mean, they yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I mean
Yeah.
that is amazing that you are the one person who got
Yeah.
their entire ordination in this film.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
there's
know.
so there's like a long process that goes into it. So at the very beginning, you come out and you're wearing white in your ordination, and there's a
Right.
person next to you who is with you in that ordination.
Oh, that was my very good friend Sogaku, who's a Portuguese guy. He's actually a teacher now in a different lineage in Paris.
Okay,
But yeah, he's already ordained. So he was sort of my wingman,
nice.
making sure I didn't mess up too much, which I'm very good at messing up. So yeah, so he kind of knew it and knew the steps. So he helped me to the choreography. Everything in Japan is about in the monastery and whatnot. There's a choreography. There's a ceremony for everything. So a lot of that whole ceremony is about just this whole ritual.
Okay, so then the Roshi gives you new clothing on a tray, and then you walk around with that. So what's the deal with the clothing on the tray that's wrapped up?
Well, I think the white symbolizes the lay person. So
Okay.
white usually symbolizes lay people in Japan in the monastery. So laymen, paying would be wearing white and not black. So ordained people would wear black. So I go back and I put on my black robe, and then I'm a different person. I'm not a lay person anymore. So it's a symbolizing me going from a lay person to an ordained person.
And then when you got that, the Roshi shaved your head a little bit and then gave
Yeah.
you more clothes. So what were those steps?
So they gave me the kesa, which is the Buddhist robe, and that's the very formal long sheet that you wear. Has lots of meaning, I'm sure. But yeah, so and he shaved that. It was like something I'm getting, but something else shaving off my delusions or final.
Yeah.
So yeah, right. So it's a civilized ritual. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then at the end, you received a really beautiful certificate, and I heard then the Roshi call you by the name Ichigen. So what does your ordained name mean?
Well, I had already had the name Ichigen, which means one. But he gave me a second name there, and that was Tairei. So I have two names there, Tairei Ichigen. And Tairei was a former Roshi at the monastery, and I'm not sure why he gave that to me. People don't normally get an ordination name, but my name, Ichigen, I had for a year or two before already. But yeah, Ichigen, yeah, that's my name.
Cool. Was any of your friends and family able to come to the ordination?
I did have a really good friend who had spent time with me at the little monastery here in the States. He had come, my good friend Chris Lanning, and then his folks were there. And then I had some friends who live in Japan who visited. My folks did not come, my family. For a lot of people, I think it's their folks aren't completely supportive of their time in the monastery. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that Americans or Westerners should study Zen in Japan?
Well, I think if you have what's called the great doubt, this is a great need, sort of your whole being needs to really discover, this real truth. I think working with maybe the best teacher, best flavor for you that works is what you need to do. And I think that, the Roshi is getting a little older now, but still the most sublime teacher I am aware of. So if, everybody's got a little flavor that works for them, So I would not tell anyone that they should go train with the Roshi. If you're like me, who, extremely intense, wanting someone who could take any kind of intensity I could offer and be able to give me more, that was the Roshi. And I ate it up, soaked it up. So if you're looking for an intense environment, I would say you might want to check that out if you're pretty psychologically stable. That said, I don't think everyone needs to go to a monastery. I don't think that's not for everyone, and that's good, And if you want to stay in the States, I think I like that Mato more. I think he's doing some cool stuff over there. I don't quite understand their schedule exactly, but I think he's doing real Rinzai training, and so I respect that.
Why'd you leave?
Well, I left because we came home and we started a family.
Oh, because you met your wife over there, right?
We did. And we left, and our karma changed, and we came home, and we had a whole life change. I was going to stay there for, probably 10 more years. And I was like the Roshi's guy. I was one of the starting lineup. I was going to be a Roshi. So then when our karma kind of shifted, then we came home and we were going to try to figure out how to stay really involved, and then it didn't quite work out. So we left the scene, and we decided to move on and be our own people.
And you talked to me, like, we've been talking now a little bit offline for several weeks now, and you mentioned to me that the monastery is sort of like a breakout for you of sorts. So how did you navigate this reorienting of yourself in society, like with a normal like daily routine and like living in cities and coming back to the States and all that? How did that reorienting happen for you?
I think that the training and the Zazen, it all gives you this internal compass, and so you have your own way of working with this true nature and with the universe, and so for me, I had to just creatively work on maintaining and working with that. So there's a whole term in Japanese Zen called kufu, and kufu means creative problem solving. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's been this just wonderful artistic kufu about how to figure out how to offer myself on the world in a meaningful way, artistic way. So it's all tied into the training. So it's like our whole lives are still the training. We're still expressing that. We're still working with that. It's just in a slightly different venue.
So Corey Hess body therapy is
Yeah.
like something that you do like for a living, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you offer several services in your body therapy profession called structural integration, Sourcepoint Therapy, and craniosacral therapy. And these are things that I'm not super versed on. So, first of all, what kind of is like the purpose of the business? And then maybe you could describe a little bit about what these services do.
Yeah. Well, people come in with certain issues. They come with sciatica, or they come with, postural issues, or headaches, or anything like that. And the structural integration. Before I went to Japan, I went through a whole the Rolfing series, and so structural integration was developed by Dr. Ida Rolf, and there are different schools of structural integration. One of them is Rolfing, which you may have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to a slightly different school. I went to the Soma Institute, but I was really impressed by the whole structural integration mindset. It was pretty out of the box, and dealing with human potential, and what gravity was, and how to align ourselves with gravity, and this concept of a line, which felt very much like an energetic aspect of Zazen. So that's how I got into structural integration. I came back looking for a medium to communicate with people. I felt like I had learned from the Roshi this very profound way of relating and communicating, and being sort of not intimate in a sexual way, but just intimate with people. And so I was looking for a way to express myself, and so that's what I chose. Craniosacral is very similar to Zazen in a lot of ways for me. It's about you're sort of like a tuning fork. I sort of do Zazen with people, and sort of working with energy fields and alignment, and allowing the system to self-organize. This is all very similar to Zazen. The source point was developed by a Rolfer who was a really high-level Kaplo Roshi student, and it's sort of like energetic Rolfing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been like a whole other language for me to figure out how to express myself after the training. So there's been a pretty cool marriage for me between Zazen, the training, koan work, and Sourcepoint. It's all sort of in this. It's all very similar to me.
So this is kind of like a way to like bring the energy work that you were talking about earlier kind of out off the cushion, out of the monastery, and sort of into the world, right?
Yeah, as Zen people, the whole life there is about saving, all beings, right? So at first we're sitting for ourselves, we're trying to just, get ourselves together. And then we have certain experiences, different breakthroughs, kensho, satori, all these things, they happen. And, then it's really about how do we offer ourselves to the world. And for me, I was looking for a way to offer myself to society. And, I'm still working on that. The blog is very much about that. How can I creatively help people to open up to their potential, and open up to something deep and beautiful they don't know exists. So, yeah.
How has the blog called Zen Embodiment, how has the blog helped you process lessons and memories from the monastery as you go about your life in like the world as a parent and a spouse and as a professional?
Yeah. I really believe in art, actually. I really believe that, talking again about this internal compass, I feel like the Zazen gave me this real access to this truth, and a way to interact with it cellularly. And I feel like in a way the art is very similar to that. It's like the more I try to express something that's true, the more I have to engage with this internal compass, and the more true that then the art becomes. So it's a way to kind of check myself and explore and how to really relate to people and how to help people. That's what I'm trying to do.
Nice. And you told me via email, there's a quote in one of your emails that I loved. It said, many monastics have a hard time integrating their training into a good, harmonious life. I write my blog to show that it really is possible. So it's almost kind of to me like you are like the equivalent of like a university professor in the ivory tower, you know, and some of those folks have a really, really hard time communicating their expertise to people who don't have their training in physics or chemistry or animal sciences or whatever. And it seems like you do. It seems like you have a good ability to bring the sort of ivory tower phenomenon to ordinary language that people can get.
Boy, I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I really feel, you know, I'm going to do it. I'm figuring out how to do it, you know, and I feel like it's very important to demystify some of this. The blog is for a few different people. It's for people who are just starting out. Some of the blog posts are about how can we just engage with our process? How can we really start to get involved in that and know there is a process? And then that's also for very serious people. Some of my monk friends in the monastery read it, and it's my way to be a senpai to them and to help them to say, you can break through. You can really do this. You can transform. You can, metamorphosize through this work. And then it's also, you know, for some of my buddies who are out and they're, again, trying to figure out how to, bring it all into their lives. How can we do that? And the blog is, again, it's for me. It's my own way of exploring that and trying to express something real and true. And so I write it for myself, and I write it for all those other people too. So yeah.
How does so I loved your entry. One of them in particular that I was thinking about is Zen Dad.
Yeah.
So I have a daughter too. So how does your Zen practice and the training that you have undergone, how does that influence your parenting?
Well, I think they very easily can realize or they realize they're connected with their true nature, I think. So I think trying to let that really thrive and flourish within them. So I think we're trying to help that to just naturally exist. That's what we're trying to do as parents, is let their spirits really kind of soar. That's our hope. Is I think we went to do a lot of this training, I think, to kind of shake off a bunch of filters that we had built upon ourselves. You know, the Zen monk is a person that's they're not perfect. They're not doing anything perfect, but their filter is they don't have filter so much. So they're right there. They're fresh, and I think that kids have this fresh state of mind, and so we're just trying to help that to flourish. Try not to get in the way too much. You know, that's what we're trying to do.
Nice. Well, Corey Hess, author,
Yes,
former Zen monk, body therapist. Tell everybody who's listening like where they can find all of your writing and your professional endeavors on the interwebs.
Well, my business site is CoreyHessBodyTherapy.com, and my blog is actually on there as well. But the more well-known blog is the Zen Embodiment.com, and that's where it is. I'm out on Whidbey Island and north of Seattle, Salish Sea.
You always invite for comments on all of your website postings as well, don't you?
Yes, I love to hear comments. I'd love to be able to be helpful in any way that people have. I often get questions from people from Poland are writing me about different energetic problems they're having or issues or questions about Zazen, and I really enjoy that. That's really fun, especially some of these issues that nobody seems to have a way to talk about. A lot of us Zen people, we've been through a lot of that, sitting on the cushion for all those hours. We've banged our head in all enough, and we kind of just stopped. And so we've been through a lot of these issues. So I'm happy to hear any questions or comments. I love getting comments like, oh, that really helped me. I'm not getting paid for my blog, so it's very nice to hear, oh, that was helpful.
Nice. Well, Corey Hess, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your monastery experience and all of your professional work today. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure for me, too. Thank you.
As mentioned in the introduction, here is the full English version of the Heart Sutra, chanted by Corey Hess.
Prajna Paramidaidara Sutra Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajna Paramita, perceive that all five skandhas in their own being are empty and was saved from all suffering. O Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. That which is form is emptiness, that which is emptiness, form. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. O Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are without birth or death, are not tainted, nor pure, do not increase nor decrease. Therefore in emptiness, no form, no feelings, no perceptions, no impulses, no consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no world of eyes through to no world of mind consciousness, no ignorance, and also no extinction of it through to no old age and death, and also no extinction of no suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path, no cognition, also no attainment with nothing to attain. The Bodhisattvas depend on Prajna Paramita, and their mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. Far apart from every deluded view, they dwell in nirvana in the three worlds. All Buddhas depend on Prajna Paramita, and the answer is complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore, no. The Prajna Paramita is the great transcendent mantra, is the great bright mantra, is the utmost mantra, is the supreme mantra, which is able to relieve all suffering and is true, not false. So proclaim the Prajna Paramita mantra. Proclaim the mantra that says Yate Yate Para Yate Parasam Yate Bodhisattva.
Classical Ideas is produced by me, Greg Soden. Music on Classical Ideas is composed and performed by Derek Strybig. You can find his music at www.wearewarmmusic.com. If you like this show, please rate it on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email me at classicalideas@outlook.com. or find me on Patreon at patreon.com/classicalideaspodcast. Thanks so much for listening.